Although Zoe couldn't help but think if Christopher had his way, they wouldn't even have that. She shuddered. Lorraine made scrambled eggs and bacon for breakfast. She sang as she cooked, as if the unburdening of her worries had released the music in her. You're going to make someone an obnoxious wife some day, Zoe said. Harry Sutcliffe walked into the kitchen, sniffing the air, and sat down at the table. I'm surprised you found anything here to cook. Lorraine laughed. I didn't. I brought this with me. Someone had to clean out the fridge. Well, you're a great cook, he said, pulling a plate of toast toward him. Lorraine passed him the butter. It's survival. You know, Diane can't cook squat. Anyhow, the way to a man's heart, you know. I'm practicing my skills on you. She winked at him. Zoe was amazed to see her father blush. He smiled shyly down at his plate and looked years younger. Such a small thing. Lorraine's flirting, yet it lightened his heart for a moment. Perhaps it was a glimpse of the boy Mom had fallen in love with that she saw. If I could learn to make him smile, she thought, it would be easier for us. He left right after he ate because he wanted to get some work in before he went to the hospital. The girls lingered over the cleanup. He works so hard, Lorraine said. Yeah, bills, bills, bills. Zoe's voice was gentle. She felt more compassion for the man she had seen a glimmer of this morning, different from the rigid stranger who had been around for weeks. Lorraine washed while Zoe wiped dry. Their last minutes ticked away, and Zoe still had held a secret from her closest friend. This is my last chance, you thought, but what do I say? Lorraine, there's a vampire, and I said I'd help him kill his brother, who happens to be a vampire too. It's that little boy you talked to. He almost murdered you. Oh no, I don't know how we're going to do it. I've left that up to him. If I tell her that, she'll freak. What could Lorraine do anyway? She was leaving today. She could tell Diane not to go, not for that reason. Diane would have them both locked up. Lorraine would worry herself sick all the way to Oregon. Zoe couldn't do that to her. But what am I going to do when he comes back? She thought. Can I tell him I've changed my mind? Daydreaming, Zoe? Zoe started. I guess so. About a boy? Oh, don't look so surprised. I can tell a hickey when I see one. Before she could help it, Zoe's hand went once more to her neck. She blushed. I know, Lorraine interrupted. You met some cute boy, and before you knew it, you let him go and nibble your neck, even though you hardly knew him. And then you didn't tell me because you thought you were being slutty. I was biting my tongue all last night so I wouldn't ask. Honestly, Zoe, you think it was a crime. You only live once. Is he cute? Zoe nodded, afraid to speak. Are you seeing him again? Yeah. Good grief, shut up. I can't bear to hear you run out on at the mouth so much. Never mind. I'm just pissed you didn't tell me. But I know you. As soon as you've mulled it over long enough, you'd tell me. 'Cept you'll have to write this time. Lorraine suddenly looked solemn. Promise you'll write, Zoe? Of course, silly. Zoe shook her friend's shoulder gently, relieved to change the subject. Huge, long, intricate letters about absolutely everything. Lorraine sighed. I can see I'll have to buy a dictionary. It's only Oregon, Zoe said, amused at her private joke. I can visit. They put away the last dishes. Lorraine collected her belongings, and they walked to Lorraine's house to meet Diane. They went slowly, hand in hand, as they had done when they were 8 years old. When they got to the house, everything seemed to speed up. The car was almost fully packed, which Diane was glad to point out to Lorraine. Zoe noticed uncomfortably, but they helped to squeeze in the last few bags. Diane made a fuss about positioning her guitar safely, while Lorraine looked increasingly annoyed. The good thing is, she whispered to Zoe on the other side of the Toyota, she can't play it while she's driving. They scoured the echoing house for anything left behind and found nothing. Finally, they couldn't put it off any longer. Zoe sat in the car impatiently jangling her keys, and Lorraine had to get in beside her. We've got a long drive, Diane said. Goodbye, Zoe. It's been nice knowing you. Lorraine glared at her stepmother and grabbed Zoe's hand through the window. I'll call as soon as I can. Then the car was backing out of the driveway, turning onto the quiet suburban road, and heading for the highway. Zoe watched it disappear around the next corner. DZN 256, she intoned, as if witnessing a car escape from an accident. She trailed home, turning her back on what would now always be Lorraine's old house, in which she would never enter again. Alone, she thought. No, not quite. She had a date coming up. She smiled dryly as she opened the front door and stepped into the silent house. When her father returned home that night, he came to her room where she was sitting in bed reading. Zoe smiled tentatively and patted her comforter. He accepted her invitation and sat. Then he took a deep breath, as if preparing himself for something that scared him. She tensed. "I'm sorry about the other day," he said, rubbing his chin nervously. "Your mother and I have been talking about it a lot. You're right. I haven't been giving you enough credit. After all, you've had to look after yourself so much lately, and you've done it and not complained. If that's not mature, I don't know what is. We just wanted to protect you, Zoe, but I've already said that." Zoe was embarrassed that he was apologizing, yet she was glad. She wasn't quite sure what to do, however. She wanted a hug, but she felt too shy. "I had a talk with this guy at the hospital. Your mom talked me into it. This therapist guy. Apparently they have these counseling sessions for families of patients." Zoe knew what he meant, terminally ill, but he still couldn't make himself say it. He made some sense. I was surprised, really. Don't know why. Thought I was the only one who ever went through it, I guess. But he really hit the nail on the head a few times about how I was feeling, that is. He stared past her at the wall as if it were easier to speak that way. Anyhow, his gaze shifted down to the carpet, still avoiding her eyes. "I thought you might like to come along next time. Next week, maybe. It might help us through this. I don't know. God knows. We need something. They've got groups. That sort of thing." He rubbed at his corduroys nervously. She reached over to the fidgeting hand. Whoever this man at the hospital was, he seemed to have gotten through to her father. Maybe there was hope in this. "I'd like to give it a try." He looked up and gave her a relieved smile. "That's settled, then." He brought his hand down on his knee like a judge's gavel. Then his smile faded slightly. "She's not going to feel too good tomorrow. Another treatment. But we want you to come the next day, Zoe, and have a proper talk about everything. Everything you can think of. I think we all need it. You can stay as long as you like." "I'd like that," she said, daring to feel relief. He took her hand. "We don't want you to feel shut out. We never did." Zoe squeezed his hand back. "I know, but well, I felt so rotten." She couldn't hold the tears back. Damn, she thought. I don't want to make him feel bad again. I don't want to scare him off. But her father took her in his arms and held her, and stroked her back. He's really trying, she thought, and that made her cry harder. He was her daddy again. He would look after her and make things all right. She was finally all cried out, and he pulled away. "Why don't you get some sleep?" He kissed her forehead and left, closing the door. Zoe turned out the bedside lamp and settled down to sleep. It should have been easier now, because she felt a weight was lifting from her, but she remembered Simon, and the weight came crashing down again. When is he coming back, she thought. What have I got myself into? But her father was talking now, more open, so perhaps he would understand. Maybe could get her out of it, somehow. No, if she didn't think Lorraine would believe her, why would her father? He has to believe, she thought. I don't lie. He'd at least believe she'd met a dangerous young man and do something about it. Call the police, maybe, and not leave her alone. She talked herself out of bed and to her father's door. She knocked slightly, no answer. She knocked again, a little louder. Still no answer. She opened the door and looked inside. He lay on the rumpled bedspread, fully clothed and fast asleep. His briefcase lay beside him on the bed, unopened. He frowned in his sleep and snored slightly, an airy whistle like a child's. He was exhausted. She realized how unfair it would be to tell him, how absurd to expect him to believe. I can't wake him, she thought, and returned to her room. It's up to me now. She slept late the next day, and her father was gone when she woke. Whether to the office to get a quiet Sunday's worth of work in, or to the hospital, she didn't know. He'd forgotten to leave a note.